like to call to order a regular meeting of the Wausau Board of Education. We were agendized to start immediately preceding the special meeting, should the special meeting end early, which it did. Well, not early, but before 5 p.m. So with that, agenda item 2, roll call. Clerk Peck.
Jim Boucher.
Yes.
Jeff Lee.
Yes.
Kyle Lowe. Here. Beth Martin.
Yes.
Pat McKee.
Yes.
Jane Roosh.
Yes.
Lance Trollope.
Yes.
Lee Webster.
Yes.
Tricia Zunker.
Present. All right, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have 2 proclamations tonight. Agenda item 4, the first proclamation is Gifted Education Month, and Vice President McKee will read that proclamation.
I did print them off for you.
Yeah.
Oh, good job.
Okay, State of Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction proclamation. Whereas we are responsible for the future we collectively create, all students with intellectual, academic, creative, leadership, and artistic gifts and talents need to be appropriately identified, instructed, and supported so they too can help co-create our future. And whereas just as giftedness comes in a variety of domains and has no limits related to sex, race, color, religion, multilingualism, age, national origin, sexual orientation, economic status, and ability. And whereas collaboration between schools, district staff, families, organizations, community members, nations, and students serves as the critical foundation for supporting all high ability and high potential children and youth. And whereas the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction joins the leadership of the Wisconsin Association for Talented and Gifted, the Wisconsin Center for Academically Talented Youth, the Wisconsin Association of School District Administrators, the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, the Association of Wisconsin School Administrators, the Wisconsin Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, the Wisconsin RTI Center, and the Cooperative Educational Service Agencies in working together to support Wisconsin's children with gifts and talents. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Carolyn Stanford Taylor, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, declare October as Gifted Education Month to recognize the impact of supporting our gifted learners.
All right, thank you, Vice President McKee. Agenda item 5 is the Indigenous Peoples Day Proclamation. And with that in mind, I would like to greet everybody. Hainachuda Haipi, Ho-Chunk Rajga, Hinakpi Hingade. It's good to see you all here today. My Ho-Chunk name is Good Woman. Whereas Native Americans have inhabited this continent and this region since time immemorial, and whereas Wisconsin is home to 11 federally recognized Native nations and 1 federally unrecognized nation, namely the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, Forest County Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk Nation, Lakota Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, Lac du Flambeau Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin, Oneida Nation, Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, Mole Lake, Sakagan Chippewa Community, Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, St. Croix Chippewa Indians of Wisconsin, Stockbridge Muncie Community Band of Mohican Indians, and Brothertown Indian Nation. And whereas throughout Wisconsin's history, Indigenous leaders have defended the land, protected the water, and championed Native rights, sovereignty, and prosperity, and in doing so, have promoted the health and well-being of all people in the state. And whereas the state of Wisconsin recognizes the immense historical, cultural, and contemporary significance of the Indigenous peoples of this region, without whom the building of our state would not have been possible, as well as the centuries of colonization, exploitation, and systemic racism Indigenous peoples have and continue to endure at the hands of our state and federal governments. And whereas Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by the International Conference on Discrimination Against the Indigenous Population of the Americas, and in October 2019 was established in Wisconsin via Executive Order Number 50 to be observed statewide on the second Monday in October. And whereas on this occasion, we strongly encourage all businesses, organizations, public institutions, and local governments to recognize, celebrate, and cultivate strong relationships with Indigenous peoples and Native nations, and incorporate instruction on Indigenous history, culture, and tribal sovereignty into their practices. And whereas today the state of Wisconsin stands in solidarity with Indigenous peoples throughout the state, reaffirms its commitment to closing equity gaps through policy and practice, and pledges to respect the inherent sovereignty of all Native nations and partner with them to ensure Indigenous people can thrive in our state. Now therefore I, Tony Evers, Governor of the state of Wisconsin, do hereby proclaim October 12, 2020 as Indigenous Peoples Day throughout the state of Wisconsin, and I commend this observance to all our state's residents. All right, agenda item 6 is the reading of the mission statement. It is the mission of the Wausau School District to advance student learning, achievement, and success. Agenda item 7, public and student comment. Do we have a form?
Yes, she's bringing it.
Okay. Okay, so we have a few individuals for public comment tonight. Just as a reminder, the public comment policy is governed by 167.3, public participation at board meetings. Anyone having legitimate interest in the actions of the board may participate during the public portion of a meeting. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes duration. Clerk Peck will hold up time at the 2-minute mark, and 30-second mark, and at time. Speakers shall direct all comments to the board and not to staff or other participants. Public comments identifying specific personnel or students by name are not appropriate subjects for presentation to the school board and should be referred to the superintendent's office. Speakers bear the personal risk if anything they say during the public comment period is defamatory, slanderous, or otherwise harmful to another individual. The presiding officer values civil discourse and may interrupt or terminate a speaker's comments when the statement is too lengthy, disruptive, disorderly, threatening, or obscene. With that, I will call individuals, and I'll let you know who's on deck also, so that you can be prepared. And if you will state your name and your address for the record when you come to do the public comment, which will be up here at the podium.
Actually, right here.
Oh, right there, the microphone right there. Okay. So first will be Johnny Fortenberry. That will be our first public comment, followed by Scott Charette.
This is the podium.
And if you could just state your name and address for the record at the outset.
Yes.
Thank you.
Johnny Fortenberry, 511 Roger Drive. Is it working? When I attended the last meeting, throughout the last couple of weeks, people asked me what happened at the meeting. And what I told them was it was a 5.5-hour meeting to determine whether to vote here again tonight. I want to talk about two of the votes that were taken. The first vote about the vacant seat board. Questions were raised about conflict of interest and campaign contributions, and we were told that there is none. But there certainly is a perception. Was I voted against for contributing to Tom Tiffany campaign? Why were the resulting votes not published on the website school district? Why did a candidate with the most votes in round 1 not even be considered for round 2? Why are some board members voting for different amounts of candidates? Why are some of the ballots unsigned? As a member of this community that pays the taxes of the school board, I think you should reconsider voting, and in the interest of transparency, I will remove my name, and I believe you, Mrs. Zucker, should remove your name from voting. The other vote was about opening our schools, which resulted in another vote here tonight. Since school started, I've wondered something maybe the school board could help me with. Is Newman Catholic High School smarter than us and know how to open their schools safely? Or does Newman Catholic High School just not care as much for their students as we do? Because one of the two things must be true. Last meeting, I listened to reasons why we can't reopen from the board. If the students were broken up by alphabet, what happens after school if A is dating Z? To that, I would say, it's none of your business who sees each other outside of school hours. I heard that we can't open because Marathon County is the largest county in Wisconsin. What that has to do with it, nobody knows, is speaking in platitudes. The second largest county, Bayfield, does have schools open. But why schools should be open? If the average person gets coronavirus, they have a 99.7% chance of surviving. The CDC, average death of an adult male is 78. The average death of somebody with coronavirus is 79. Most children diagnosed with coronavirus didn't even know they had it. Dr. Andrew Boston conducted a study of 70,000 college students attended 50 universities across the country. Out of the 70,000 positive cases, 3 had to go to a hospital. 3. I implore you to open our schools back up. I do not want the Wausau School District to force anybody to have to send their children to school. Nor do I want the Wausau School District to force my children not to go to school. It's not about the education of the 3 R's, writing, reading, and arithmetic. It's about our children's spirit. Your decisions to close our schools is teaching them to live their life in fear. You're crushing the spirits of our children every day you keep our schools closed. Let us, as Americans, decide what is best for our children instead of a school board. Thank you.
Okay, up next we will have, next will be Scott Charette, followed by Joe Bone. I'm sorry, I know you spoke last time, I let public comment, and I got it wrong last time too. But that's the order.
Hi, all. Hello, everybody to the board. You guys have a very hard decision coming up. To be honest with you, when I came in, I thought I was signing in to sign into the board meeting. I had no idea I was going to speak, but the subject is pretty important. I thought, what a great opportunity. I have 2 kids in the district. I've got 3 more coming. So I understand that your guys' decision is an agonizing one, and I don't envy any of you. However, the things that I heard from the last board meeting kind of trouble me. And what I heard is that we should follow the science. So we should follow the science. One of the largest studies that was done in India. And we have children, and we know that children are asymptomatic carriers. They could be test positive for the coronavirus, but we don't look for that. We look for symptoms. Those symptoms don't present themselves in children, so we don't look if they're testing positive or not. Meanwhile, that virus is being spread throughout the district. What a great tool that you guys put on your website was the coronavirus, the dashboard, if you will. That dashboard has gone consistently up with our children outside of school. I think Wausau, or not Wausau, but Wisconsin was rated as the #1 infection spot in the country right now. I don't know how in good conscience, with those numbers and with that study from India, if we are following the science, how we could open the schools. And that's just my opinion. Thank you. I'll sit back.
Mr. Short, I'm so sorry. Could you say your name and address?
Oh,
for the
sorry,
record?
3385 Horseshoe Springs.
Thank you. Okay, finally, we have Joe Bone, please, and name and address for the record.
Actually, it's BAME,
Okay.
but everybody gets it wrong, so no problem. Joe BAME, 227531 Boulder Ridge Circle, Wausau. The longest address, thanks to Marathon County. A few comments. A lot of talk tonight about following the science. Nothing is more important in science than hard data. I'm happy to see that we have some data here on the screen. Here are a few more interesting data points that you will not hear on whatever media source you use to be informed. There are 328 million people in the United States. 320 million of them have not tested positive for COVID. There are 5.8 million people in the state of Wisconsin. 5.6 million of those people have not tested positive for COVID. More than 8 months into this pandemic. There are 135,692 people in Marathon County. 133,000 of those have not tested positive for COVID. There's a lot of focus on the number of cases. Most newscasts lead with how many new cases we have. It's a silly number. It means absolutely nothing. It's a function of how many tests are done. More people than those numbers I just told you actually are infected with COVID or have been. Maybe 25% of your students have been. We don't know because most of them don't get sick. The general population, a large percent, don't get sick. We know who does get sick. We know those demographic figures because 210,000 people died in order for us to learn who is at risk. It is not the children. It's up to citizens who are in the high-risk demographic to protect themselves and their loved ones to protect them. If children are coming home to a household where somebody is at high risk, they need to be kept away from those high-risk people. I have a 91-year-old father and an 89-year-old mother who have huddled in their home in northern Wisconsin since February. I haven't hugged them. When I visit them, I stay 10 feet away and I wear a mask. That's what has to happen. What cannot happen is locking down the rest of our society to protect those people. It's up to them and their families to protect them. Last thing. I don't know if you've heard of it yet, but you will. The Great Barrington Declaration. As of today, 31,000 doctors, medical professionals, and scientists have signed this declaration saying that the shutdowns have to end. It's more destructive than the pandemic. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Boehm. Okay, moving on. We are on Agenda 8. Yes?
I'm getting a text that there's no meeting video.
Oh,
I'm trying to establish it, but it's not streaming.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we will keep moving on while that's being worked on. So we have agenda item 8, approving the consent agenda. And I would like to highlight donations to the district. Donations in the last month came from Frank Epstein, Chase Kazmerchik, Wausau Coated Products, Heidi Dirks, Herbert and Gerberts, DonorsChoose.org, April Gradzulewski, UMR, Robert and Lisa Donahue, Wausau East Gridiron Club, Wisconsin Valley Flag Football, John Fisher, Jenny Gordon Group LLC, Dolly Lepper Fisher, Condor Coffee, Phelan Ratanawang, Lopa Kabir Islam, Amaximo, Gregory and Ingrid Zabadowski, Scott and Elisa Murch, and James and Susan Seigan. With that, I am seeking a motion to approve the consent agenda with great gratitude for those donations to the district. That's a first from Jim. Oh, I'm just used to from the virtual meetings. First from Jim Boucher, second from Lee Webster.
Thank you, because I can't see everybody.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion. Oh, okay, so we have an abstention from Dr. Lee. Motion carries. 8 yes, 1 abstention, 0 no. Okay, next on the agenda, we move to old and recurring business. Wait, does this get updated? Is there something posted on the agenda today that's not in the...
The next thing should be the COVID data update.
Okay, so I'm seeing something different here. Okay, so then, yeah, we do move on to agenda item 9, old recurring business, starting with 9A, the COVID data update from administration.
Thank you. At this time, I invite Angie Blake, People Services Director, to share an update.
Great point.
Good evening, Board. So today I just put together the data from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services. So as you've seen in the news recently, Wisconsin's on the rather high side. Marathon County in particular is in the very high side. So as you can see, the burden or the case rate per 100,000 people right now in Marathon County is 701. And our case trajectory or change in cases is plus 39%. So those top, I think there's 9 of them, are all in the very high category. And there's a graphic on the second page that we can take a look at. So if you look at the very high and growing trajectory, it's all of those little boxes are the counties that are reflected in the top data. I also included Milwaukee County and Dane County. Those have been very high. Can you scroll back to that, Cassie? Sorry. But as you can see, they're coming down. So Milwaukee has no significant change in trajectory, and Dane County, where Madison is located, has actually gone down. So that's good news for them. And then as you can see on the bottom, I put just our state data at this point. Wisconsin, again, is in the very high status, and it has 566.8 cases per 100,000 people. So you can compare that to Marathon County data. And then can you bring up our school dashboard? Scroll down a little bit. So on that green bar in the middle, it will tell you that we have a total staff positive rate of 14 right now. We have 3 students who are tested positive that we know about. We're not currently asking families to disclose that to us unless if it's students in our hubs. Total staff quarantined are 35, and total students quarantined at this time are 40. So Dr. Hiltz did the math on this a little bit earlier, and we're down from what we were 2 weeks ago. Do you have that number with you?
I do. Are you talking positivity rate?
Yeah.
Yeah. On Friday, we were 0.40%. Today, we're at 0.23%.
So we've gone down. In our county right now, we have, I know it's up there somewhere, 1,363 active cases, which is about half of the cases that we've had since March are currently active. We've had a little over 2,600 since March, and right now over 1,300 are positive.
Angie, the number of students in quarantine this week is significantly lower than last week. Is that in the high schools?
Yes.
Is that because of sports?
Yes. Any other questions that anybody has for me about the data?
So did you communicate with the health department school team about how many students are tested positive or in quarantine, or do you get the numbers in some other way?
So that's interesting. That's changed. We now do our own contact tracing for students and staff. So what the health department does is if they get a positive COVID case, they do the interviews with that person, and they tell us who the close contacts are, and then it is our job to then reach out to those close contacts if they are in the school district.
So it's a coordinated effort?
It is a coordinated effort, yes. It's not as timely as it had been in the beginning due to a lot of cases now, but yeah, we still work with them every day.
Just got one quick question here. Katie, last time you had shared the information, it was for school districts that were open, quote unquote, that their positive infection rate was actually lower than ours. If I'm interpreting the data from Wausau and DCLs correctly, it looks like that is still the case.
Yes. Yeah, I've got the numbers here. We checked today just to make sure they're as accurate as possible, as timely as possible. So currently, Stevens Point positivity rate is 0.21%. Mosinee says it's 0.05. DC Everest is 0.20. Wisconsin Rapids is 0.30. Marshfield is 0.12. A couple of these dashboards just went up today, by the way. And then our rate, as I said on Friday, was 0.40, and it dropped to 0.23 today. So we're all really in the same ballpark. Something to note is that these rates obviously change every day. They even change hourly. So that's the most current data we have.
And just to confirm that point, Mosinee, Everest, Rapids, they are all in person in some form or another?
Yes.
Okay.
Marshfield as well.
Marshfield. Thank you.
I do have another question about the quarantine. I noticed also the staff number has been reduced.
Mm-hmm.
The number seemed quite high last week. These teachers that are in quarantine, are they teaching virtually, or are we having to find substitutes for them?
It depends on if they are sick. So if they are simply in quarantine because they've been a close contact, in most cases, and Tabitha is here somewhere, in most cases, they are teaching from home. I think there have only been a couple of cases where the teacher has been too sick to then teach.
Okay. Do you have more information for us, Angie?
I do not.
Oh, okay.
I was waiting for questions.
Any other questions for Angie? Okay, I don't think we have any right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so then are we over to you, Keith? Do you have any additional information for us?
Just a bit, yeah. So we're on the project relaunch update action requested. My position, my recommendation really hasn't changed since the last meeting, but I do want, before that, I do want to recognize the board's focus on the safety of students and staff in the community. I know that's your focus. I share that with you, and in sharing that with you, I do want to reiterate the data I just shared at the request of Mr. McKee, that our rate is the same or higher as the districts who are in session in person. And so in addition, so I guess, as a board, we're following the data. Again, my recommendation as your Chief Executive Officer, the recommendation of Joan Toyer, the Marathon County Health Officer, the request of our families, and the majority of our staff is to somehow get students back in person. I would say that, add to that we did send a survey to families to confirm, right? The first survey was to check their interest. Now we're confirming. We're similar on the response rate, the percentage who are coming in. They're a little lower. I think the last count were about 2/3 of the families who are going to be sending their students if we do open. I would add that in that survey, we only heard from the families of about 5,000 students. So that means over the last week, our principals, our front office staff, our guidance counselors have been making contacts to these families one at a time to add in that data. I think, and Bob Test, I want to thank him, he's been working tirelessly to clarify data, repeat data that's come in, or inaccurate data, or names that don't match. Lots of times, I think we're down to about 1,000, Mr. Test. There he is. About 1,000 left?
Let's say 1,200.
1,200 left. So there's been a lot of time put into help the families identify their course moving forward. So we hope to get almost all of those parents, all those students identified by the end of the week if the board agrees to continue with our current plan. And we would be ready to open that Monday, November 2nd, I believe it is. I haven't checked that, according to the previous plan. I would just add, and I think you probably received some of the same messages from parents of students who previously felt very successful in school and now feel that they are unsuccessful in this new environment. We're all here for kids, I know that. And if we have a system that is allowing a segment of our students to feel less capable and less successful than previously, and we have data that indicates it's safe to bring students back, I would just strongly again reiterate that recommendation that we continue with the plan that the board approved tentatively at our last meeting. And I'd certainly welcome any questions.
I do have a couple questions for clarification. The first is identifying the students that will stay virtual and then figuring out the teachers who will then be the virtual teachers. Can you elaborate on that? And then related to that is, what would the threshold be to say, okay, this school is going to go completely virtual? And then what is the impact of, I guess, those classes, those students that are already virtual? They would just continue to work with their virtual teacher, I assume. But if you could just talk about those things.
Sure. I will share what I know, and if Ms. Gunder might be available to help me if I need. So we need to have enough accurate data to be able to determine pretty closely the number of students that would be being educated virtually, so that we can match up the appropriate number of staff. I think with 1,000 or 1,200 missing, I think we need some more data. I don't think we can extrapolate that far. But once I would say by the end of the week, I'm looking out to confirm maybe that if we get up in that 95% range, we could probably start to do staffing planning. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So we would have tried to work with the staff who have identified compromised immune systems, right? People who have requested that if students return, that they be able to teach virtually. We would start with that group. Again, as I mentioned, I doubt that those wishing to teach virtually will perfectly match the need, but I have great confidence in our HR team to match those requests as much as possible. Yes, is there a cutoff? Several months ago, actually, we had spoken about a metric that we understood, that we owned, right? And we had talked about a percentage of students or percentage of staff that we would look to determine if we would move to plan B or C at that time. At this point, really, those were our estimates of the number of staff that could be absent, where we could still continue to bring students in and supervise them and instruct them. The question is more complex than a number because it depends on where those teachers are located. Are they all in the same building? Are they in the same grade level? You know, all those factors fit in. Do we have substitutes that can match the needed assignment? So really, it's going to come down to, do we have whatever adequate staff is in order to continue to serve the students in person? And again, we know that we're down about 100 substitute teachers from where we would have been last year. So that also plays into what this percentage might be. Tabitha, would you add anything to that?
I would, and should I do that?
Please, yeah, would you mind, so we can capture your comments?
So the only thing that I would actually like to add is that it is possible that we could be in a situation that because of a positive case in one of our classrooms, we may have to quarantine a classroom or a portion of a classroom. That is something that other districts have faced that are in live instruction. And if that were to happen, I don't think that we would be in a bad place, because I think we could completely transition a classroom, if necessary, to virtual instruction, with the teacher doing virtual as well as the students doing virtual learning, if that classroom does need to be quarantined. So that's definitely a possibility. How often will it happen? No way we can predict that. Our focus on our social distancing, our wearing of our masks, doing the personal hygiene improvements in terms of hand washing and hand sanitizer are really our best defense mechanism to prevent that as much as possible. But I do think that we have lots of different options that we can go to in order to continue the learning in the best way possible for our students. So.
Thank you. Any other questions for Gundy? Did I answer all your questions, Tricia?
Well, I do have, I'm sure other people have questions, but there were some recommendations that were in the know for things I don't have in front of me, but regarding band, clubs being online, sports, varsity sports. Are we going to follow all those recommendations?
So are you talking about the recommendations from Marathon County Health?
I think, is that what that was?
So, yeah, right now, the highest number of cases, let me back up half a step. When I talked to Ms. Toyer, roughly 90% of transmissions happening in the community. The vast majority of cases that are happening in schools are happening in their co-curricular areas. And so that is the basis for her recommendation. If we want to continue or bring students back in person, we should consider canceling sports and co-curricular activities. In talking with our athletic directors, I know they would disagree, but of course they do have a bias. But they certainly see the value of the students that are participating in those events. So we did not bring that recommendation tonight. I wanted, again, to talk with the superintendents from the Valley Conference. Again, I've not had that conversation with Victoria myself, so I would like to engage in that conversation with her and better understand her recommendation.
Jim?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Having a hard time hearing myself. Some of the things that I've been hearing from our teachers, especially FIAD teachers, encore teachers, things of that fashion, people in those areas are real concerned about not having physical education in gyms where you have great circulation and you have people far enough apart. I know that working in a couple of our local districts around us as a substitute teacher, I've been in those FIAD classes, and there is great separation, and the students would respect that separation of one another. So I'm asking you a little bit more about the information about the encore and physical education, and how can we help them really teach our students physical movement during this time.
Right. So we could speak about FIAD or all the encore, because all the encore at the elementary will be done in the classroom. Right? FIAD in particular, there's been a number of studies about, one, keeping students in the classroom as much as possible. They also spoke to the idea that FIAD is probably most effective outdoors, when possible. I wonder if, Andrea, would you have more to add to that? I know you've been doing extensive research and work with the teachers on the recommendation for that format.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Hiltz. That's a great question, Mr. Boucher. We have taken in a lot of research and information that's been shared with us, and it's actually come through the recommendation of the DPI that we don't co-mix students. We keep them in.
You may want to speak into the mic a little closer.
Okay. Is that better? Can you hear?
Yeah.
I think it is on. Yes? Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Not really.
No?
I don't think it's on.
It says it's on. It does say it's on. Is that better? A little bit better? All right. That's a great question, Mr. Boucher. We took recommendations throughout the summer in the pandemic team committee as we were doing planning from both the DPI and from neighboring states and other research organizations to identify the best choices when it comes to teaching encore classes. The number one recommendation is not co-mixing cohorts of students. So instead of rotating them through separate spaces, instead we would keep them within their classrooms. So that's our recommendation for our elementary encore, is that the teachers would actually go to the students. We've been working tirelessly throughout the last week to identify 6 feet of social distancing in all of our schools, in all of our classrooms. In addition, then we would have areas in which the FIAD teachers and other encore would be teaching in a safe manner. So that's our decision at this time.
If I could just follow up, Andrea, in part because I want to make sure that it is captured, but also just for the clarification. We have heard from some concerns from elementary that there were some classrooms that could have up to 20 students in them, which doesn't seem to lend itself to the 6 feet of social distancing. But you are stating here now that every elementary classroom will have the 6 feet of social distancing.
It is our goal to have every classroom have available 6 foot of social distancing for safety for students and for the staff. We also need a safe space in the beginning or in the front of the room for our staff. If a classroom cannot accommodate that, then we're looking for other spaces within the school of which we could do that. So every school has been walked through, each classroom and every identified space that we could use for learning. Yes.
Thank you.
So, Andrea, in the end, it will be 6 feet apart.
That is our goal, yes.
No, but I mean, that will be achieved.
Yes.
Okay.
I would just, again, thank Andrea. She's been walking through the principals every school. It's a multi-hour tour, I understand, to check every classroom, check the distances. We're taking the mitigation precautions very seriously.
Just one quick addition. I had the opportunity to observe practices for 3 different sports, and this is more of a thank you to the athletic directors. Whatever message was sent a few weeks ago, we have reports that people may not have been following. I had the opportunity to watch 3 or 4 separate practices and games, and I can say that to a person, everyone was masked. I even saw some kids playing tennis matches with masks on. I don't know how they did it, but I was very impressed. There was no kind of shirking in that responsibility. They followed it very well.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's great to hear.
So Keith, just to go back to the other recommendation, I don't think you addressed this. Another recommendation had been to extend Thanksgiving and winter break to 2 weeks. Is that anything that you are considering? I ask about these recommendations because I certainly would feel more comfortable if we were following all the recommendations that we're getting from the health department.
Yeah, I have to tell you that we've really been focused on doing the background work for trying to get, ready to bring students back November 2nd. We've not had an opportunity to really discuss those.
Was that recommendation to extend the break or simply to have some virtual days following those vacations? So kids come back from spring break and was it to extend the break or to have some virtual days first as sort of a buffer? Do you know?
Keith, I can talk to it. I was at that meeting. So what Joan said was that, it's recommended. However, she understands that if the kids aren't in school with us, they're out in the community. And we can set our schools up to have safety mitigation measures where they might not be getting that out in the community. So it was given as a recommendation. In case if there are a lot of cases, it would break that cycle of the cases. It would be like an automatic built-in 2-week quarantine. If that makes sense. Did that answer your question, Lance?
Yeah, I saw that recommendation of the extended break, and I just wondered why it would be an extended break as opposed to just doing virtual, as opposed to just having no school for a week extra or something.
And you're right. I mean, we could do it virtually. Just not having the kids in person for 2 weeks was the objective.
And frankly, Lance, that's some of the questions that I'd like to discuss with Joan. Because again, if what we're seeing in the data are accurate, the students are actually safer in the schools where we can control their environment a little more. So why would we send them back to virtual when we're just trying to bring them back into person? So
right, and obviously we don't need to decide today what's going to happen after winter break or spring break or anything like that. I was just curious.
Our annual instructional time hasn't changed, has it? So we would have to make it up in some sense in any case.
So I just had a meeting with Mike Thompson from DPI again last week. And yeah, the required instructional hours have not changed. However, DPI recognizes that when students are learning in a virtual setting, they do not require the same number of hours. As you can imagine, there are no passing periods. There is there's nothing built. It's just straight time. So DPI is going to be very lenient when it comes to instructional hours. If at the end of the year even we felt like we needed to get a waiver, we can apply for it at any time. I don't feel that's going to be necessary.
Angie, I have a question. As we move towards opening, one of the things that I'm very much aware as a mental health provider is we've had kids in our office that have been very terrified at times. And the consortium has been providing services in all of our schools. Is that going to open up that opportunity then for the kids that need in-house counseling will still be able to get that then once we open up?
So are you asking if the therapists will be able to come into our buildings?
Yes.
So in the DPI guidance, it is only essential visitors. So we would have to determine as a district if we're considering therapists essential visitors. They want the least amount of people exposed in the schools as possible to try to stay away from quarantining and keep the virus out. So, and that has come up a lot during the consortium because you can't leave a child unsupervised in a room to do teletherapy, but you can't have somebody in the room with that child to do teletherapy because it's a confidentiality breach. I know right now Everest is not having therapists in their buildings. I'm not sure about the rest of the Marathon County districts, but I know Everest has chosen not to at this time because of the rise in cases in our county. So I guess I don't have a straight answer for you on that. It's a lot that we haven't even discussed yet.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about that because at this point, the youth suicide rate is already number 2 cause of death from kids 10 to 24. And the anxiety and depression levels are so significantly higher. We're already talking about we're going to increase the number of cases already by the time the kids are back, like 2 to 3. And we are looking at PTSD rates that are going to be out of sight in the future. So I'm just putting in a plug for that.
So the roughly 1,200 students that still have to be identified as to whether they're going to stay virtual or come back in person, is it clarified on those conversations that when they return, it's not going to look like school did pre-pandemic?
We try to make that message very clear, both in the survey, in the video, and of course now with people calling, there's a wonderful opportunity for parents to ask those kinds of questions and for staff to kind of clarify that. So I can't guarantee it, but we are trying to make sure that's a clear message.
I have a question pertaining to our enrollment on the third Monday. Where did we end up with that? Actually, not third Monday, third Friday. Where did we end up with number of students, things of that nature? Did we lose a lot?
I believe we had sent out a preliminary number of, we lost 433. I believe it ended up about 426. I don't know if Mr. Uding is here, but we're roughly in that negative 430 students.
I don't have a question, but I have more of a comment. I guess for me, the crux of the issue is whether you believe it makes a difference what's going on in the community as far as community spread goes. And every time we meet, the situation in the Wausau community gets worse. And now, when Wausau is making number 6 on the list of cities in the entire United States for spread, and Central Wisconsin is sending patients to other parts of the state or other states because the hospitalization rate is so high, it seems like the exact wrong time to start bringing kids into indoor enclosed spaces with poor ventilation. So I think we all have the goal that we want everyone back. I think what we disagree about is when it's safe. And what I'm looking for is, as far as data is, a couple of weeks of decreasing cases and a lower positivity rate. And I understand your reasoning that we have controlled the situation when kids are in school. And I know that people are working as hard as they can to keep kids safe. But I do think it matters what community members and students and families do outside of the school. If they're still going to weddings and indoor dining, restaurants, they're bringing all of that back into our school community. And whether we like it or not, when we're together, we spread the virus. So at this time, I just don't think that that's a safe thing to do.
I think those numbers are important and they're concerning. But they were more important before school started when we had no idea what it was going to be like at schools in person and we were all just guessing. Now, we actually have schools in person that we can look at. We don't have to really guess anymore. So for me, seeing how the other schools are doing is more important because I'm looking at those numbers And I'm seeing more staff positive in our district than in Spash, which is almost the same size as us. And a lot of our staff in our district tend to be focused. Same for students. So when I look at those numbers, I wonder what we're accomplishing by not being in school. Those numbers to me are more important than the county numbers, or the county numbers are important. If you flipped it and you had the county numbers low, let's say you had the county numbers below what they were when we first started talking about these plans, but by the opposite situation we have now, we had the schools in person showing much higher rates than ours. I'd be less inclined to go in person. So if we were able to look right now at Spash, and PC Everett, and Marshfield, and all these other schools, and we were able to see that they were doing much worse than us in terms of positive tests, I'd be thinking we have to stay virtual even if the county levels are low. Because what's more important than looking at whether or not we're going to make anything worse by bringing kids in person?
I do wonder if we have an accurate count of exactly how many students are positive, because they can be asymptomatic and often are. And if they don't have symptoms, they're not encouraged to get tested. So without testing everybody, you really don't have an idea. And if you have asymptomatic carriers in schools, they can be affecting other people in the community. You never know what's right after the school. So I do have some concern about that data and whether it's really telling us what we think it might be telling us.
Yeah, I don't think you can be 100% sure that every school district knows that they're positive tests. There's no way that's the case. But the other school districts that are testing have the same problem as we do. I guess it's just not, we talk about now, hey, if nothing else, the good news is we're going to be able to see what the other school districts do and how it works from them, for them. And now we've had the opportunity to see. And what we see is that they're not having a harder time with the virus than we are, but yet they're getting in-person education. So those numbers are much more important to me than what the community spread is. Are we going to make it worse by being in school? The evidence that we see is that we will not.
Thank you. And I would also, I'm not a public health expert, but again, reading the data, if I had COVID right now, you would be safe, and you would be safe, and you would be safe because we are following mitigation, right? We do have a mask, we are staying. And that's what I think happens in the schools, whereas at home, I remember Lance making this point in July. If the kids aren't in school, where are they, right? I would, this is a conjecture by non-medical personnel, but if we bring students into school, could we actually help reduce the transmission, because now they are in a safer environment that is definitely following mitigation protocols.
Well, they are still not in schools 17 hours of the day. So this argument that it's going to be safer in a controlled environment that goes out the window as soon as they leave the premises. As far as the COVID-19 activity level in Marathon County, I certainly would feel a lot better if that said moderate. It's only said very high for how long now? Just a couple of weeks. And I don't know if you have the exact dates on that, how long we've been at very high. And I guess this is the question I would pose to the board. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, a teacher in another district passed away and from COVID-19. And then I guess it was later determined, I haven't found anything indicating what I heard, but that this teacher didn't contract it from the school. But that's what I was told. Anyway, when I read the initial article, I was horrified because the board of that school didn't have a comment on the passing of this teacher who passed away from COVID-19. And I wonder, when we are looking at this county being in a very high level of community spread for just a short amount of time, what would this board do? What would our reaction be if something happened with a staff member or a student, and it's pointed back to the fact, well, we reopened when it was very high community spread? What did we think would happen?
That's why looking at how it's working in the other schools is what's most important to me. I also would feel better if our numbers were moderate or low. But like I said earlier, if we have low numbers, but we saw the other school districts having a much higher rate of positivity than our own, I'd be less inclined to open schools back up with in-person instruction because of what you just said. Because then I would feel like I'm now placing our staff and our students in a more dangerous situation because look, even though our numbers are low, look how much worse it is in point or PCR. That isn't the case. So that's why it's so important to me that the comparisons that we have, it's just not showing that it's less safe.
Well, and the other side to that too, Trish, and I mean, obviously if that happened, everybody would be devastated, right? That's kind of an assumption. What I also think of, and Lee and others have, I think, done a fabulous job of bringing this to the forefront, is what is this board going to do if, heaven forbid, a student takes his or her life because of the mental strain and stress that they're going through by not being able to be in this environment, in the school environment, because of the added domestic situations. I don't want to say domestic abuse, that's the wrong term, but perhaps violence in the household, alcoholism, drug abuse, whatever it is. To me, I mean, sitting here today, if I were to land on the side, I would be more inclined to say that were to happen. I think there's a higher likelihood of that than the other. I'm not scientific, but it's a balance, I look at both sides and I agree with what Lance said. The data supports the decision that we would make.
I'm really concerned with the way we look at statistics and we only get some data. The data we get about children is that oftentimes they're asymptomatic. And so we get the data that says there's an increased number of hospitals. Actually, the chamber data last Friday indicated there were 22 fewer patients in the ICU. And primarily, I think that what we have to be very sensitive to were those teachers, those students, and people in my age group, frankly, that are more susceptible. And I think that if we were to really look at statistics, we would find that the ones that are having problems are the people that are at high risk. And I think we need to be extremely sensitive to those. On the other hand, when I look at the percentages, I think there's one thing that we need to start communicating. We have a responsibility, parents and adults have always had this responsibility with children, and that children are going to be terrified when they start looking at what's happening on TV, all the statistics that they're hearing, when they start hearing people saying, well, your parents may die as a result of this, or you're going to die. And frankly, in the counseling room, it scares the daylights out of me that we as adults are not being there to reassure our children that we're there, we're watching at the statistics, they're looking at those things, and they need to know that if they say that there's been an increase in deaths, that the reality is that by far the majority of people are not experiencing those things. By far the majority of people that get this disease are getting it and are very minimal symptomatology, especially if they're not in the high-risk group. And it's time for us to start being positive and supportive and encouraging rather than pushing the fear perspective that I'm seeing going around and hearing about daily in the counseling office.
Keith, I'm still concerned about the fact that we don't know how many students are going to be virtual and how many staff are going to have to be pulled off. And I know that Bob and everybody's working diligently on this, but is it going to be a situation where, you want this November 2nd start date, I guess I'm just concerned for the planning and for teachers that suddenly have to make some big changes.
So the data, it's interesting. When we put the first survey out, Bob actually took like what I would call like a dipstick test as the survey opened, as it continued, and that percentage of 75% coming in versus 25% staying virtual didn't change by more than 1% or 2%. Now we have a second survey, again, that percentage is close to where it was. I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, so I don't want to misrepresent. But I think, while I want another 1,200 data points, if we said right now we're going to plan our staffing, and frankly we have to pretty soon, right? If we're going to open in 3 weeks, we need to identify the staff. I would, and frankly, if the board continues with our current plan, I would probably look to Tabitha to say, let's plan our staffing, right? Let's just extrapolate our data. It's been consistent every time we've done this, whether it was June or 2 months ago or now. Let's just extrapolate it. Let's plan our staffing. We'll start our transportation plan. We'll start ordering food, and we'll just be ready for that 75-25. And if students don't show up, or if they do show up, we'll have to just adjust, which is what we've been doing for weeks and months anyway.
Keith, I really like what you're doing and the fact that you're giving the parents and the families and the students choices based on a lot of the emails that we're receiving and getting this information from the students. The students want to be back. Anecdotally, we can talk about many students who are back in school right now are mitigating right along with the administration and the staff because they're concerned. As we just pointed out, the students are concerned. As a matter of fact, they will remind one another to put their masks on and keep them on. It's something we're working together on, and I think you putting this out there that then the teachers have the choice whether they can be in physical teaching or virtual, I think it's a great opportunity because everybody has some choices here.
Almost everybody, right? There, just to be clear, there might be some staff who we have to have teach in person who are not comfortable with it. But again, what I tried to share with them is if we're following our protocol, they will be safe. So, thank you.
This was an action item, everybody.
We have a recommended motion here.
Yes, the motion,
Well, the motion is to approve the modified project relaunch Plan A, bringing the 4K to 5th grade students back with face-to-face instruction 5 days a week, and the 6th through 12th grade students back on an alternating schedule starting Monday, November 2nd, 2020. I'm just reading the motion off for you. I'm reading it off for you if you want to make that first.
I'll make the first comment. Second.
Okay. I don't know if there's further discussion on this.
I want to say a few things. This is on.
Yep.
So I still wouldn't be comfortable with bringing back school face-to-face with this motion because of the increase of the status of our county, that we are still considered high. I would be more comfortable if, we were decreasing. So I wouldn't be comfortable with this motion. So just want to put that out there. Thank you.
One other point just that I wanted to bring up, that I brought up before, is just to remind everybody and those watching again that this will continue to be something that we'll have to review throughout the year. So he doesn't like we're making a decision today that either way it goes is necessarily the decision for the entire rest of the school year, and it can't be looked at again. We're going to have to keep looking at it. So while I support it right now, if things change and we start seeing that the districts in person are having much higher rates than the districts that are virtual, then my opinion on it may change as we go forward.
But you wouldn't have a virtual district to compare it to anymore.
We would have our own, and we still have districts that are doing different versions of virtual. So we have districts that have everyone in school. We have districts that have 1 day a week. There's lots of different variants out there that we can look at.
I can't imagine that once we make a decision to send kids back to school, you would be able to turn that around and say, okay, well, we're all going back to virtual.
Well, I can't speak for the rest of the board, but my opinion would turn if the evidence changed. The evidence that I see right now is it's telling me that it's not more dangerous for us to have our kids and staff in school compared to what we're doing now. That what we're doing now isn't safer. If I later felt like what we're doing is less safe, then I would have changed my opinion. That's what my opinion is based on.
So do you have any idea what that threshold might be? I mean, at first we were talking about that 20% absence rate. What would that threshold be now?
Well, the main thing that I'm looking at right now is what I said before, is looking at the districts that are in person. I don't see what we're accomplishing. I don't see what safety measure we're accomplishing. Because we are not showing lower instances of COVID in our staff. We're not protecting our staff any more than the districts that have people in person are. We're not protecting our students more. That's how I feel today. If there's new information 2 months from now, then I'm going to have a different opinion. So we just have to wait and see how things change. I mean, this has been something that's been changing over and over and over, month by month.
I appreciate. Oh, no. Well, I was just going to say, I appreciate your clarification, Lance, because I was, in our last meeting, I was trying to figure out what the disconnect was, but I wanted to make sure that what we were doing in the last meeting wasn't going to be misunderstood, which then it ended up being. So when I said final action, it certainly wasn't to indicate today is be all and end all, but it is that we have this ongoing analysis, ongoing review of the numbers and the continued safety. But I am concerned, though, if we have to go back to virtual, and it's not going to look like virtual is now, because they're pulling together these virtual classes. So we're going to have, it's going to be a new kind of virtual. I guess those in-person.
I can give you an example of a class grade level we have where there's a 3-section grade level, and it looks like 2 of the teachers are going to be teaching in person and 1 is going to be virtual. And they may have to move their kids around a little bit because if this doesn't break down, that they're not all in one class. But if that school were to go full virtual, then the ones that were teaching their kids in person, I assume, would start teaching them virtually. I mean, there wouldn't be any reason to switch it all around again. They would just switch to virtual.
Correct. We would try to minimize any transitions beyond this point.
I find it hard to believe that we're even discussing this and not discussing including the recommendations from the health department, the no ban, the only varsity sports, clubs online. We are at the height of the pandemic. Is it the acid pinnacle? We don't know yet. We have a large portion of our population that is either bored with the pandemic and wants to move on and pretend it's over. And we have a portion that denies its even existence. And now we want to put kids in school on top of each other, and we're going to let them have their sports and their clubs where their cohorts are going to mix. And then they're going to come back to their cohort schools.
Yes, just like in the other school districts.
Has there been a decision that all clubs and all extracurriculars would be going forward? I don't believe that has been made, has it?
No, and again, that conversation happened on I became aware of it on Friday, so clearly I haven't had a chance to talk to Mrs. Toyer about it. We'll have that conversation yet this week, and that's something we can bring back to the board at the end of the month.
Dr. Lee, did you have a comment?
Sure. I didn't come here tonight with a final decision on this issue, and I try to make it a practice not to come into board meetings with a final decision on important issues so that I can hear and think as we are going through the process. We're stuck in a situation with no good options, right? There is not a good decision to be made tonight. It's just different kinds of bad. And so I think we need to keep some epistemological humility, to quote one of my friends, that we just don't know a lot of things, and we're not going to know a lot of things, and you're not going to know how what you decide tonight is going to end up. And whatever decisions you make, there's going to be a cost, right? There is no cost-free solution here, so I think we need to keep that in mind. One of the important things to say is that, right, we've got a high rate right now with the schools closed. We've got a public that's not stepping up and doing their job, a public that is not dutiful, a public that is not sufficiently responsible. One of the powerful things about a school district is that we're inculcating these kids with values. Sometimes we get attacked for that, but that's one of the most positive things that we do. And so all those hours those kids will be in school, they'll be exposed to probably better values with regard to how to deal with the pandemic than they're getting on the outside. You know, I don't think it's just a safer environment because we'll be following the protocols better, but I think we have an opportunity to make a safer environment out in the community by having the kids take those values back home and be more insistent with their parents and with their other family members and with their community members. I know all the times my kids came home and insisted that I use sunscreen. I've been through that, and many other things. I got it only at times. But I think we need the kids to be influenced by the values of the school district, and that will help keep them safer. So that's at least an argument in favor of more contact between the kids and the school district. It's only one of the arguments we need to be thinking about.
Call for the question.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, a first and a second, and we'll roll call vote this. Kathy?
Yes. Jim Boucher?
Yes.
Jeff Lee?
Yes.
Kyle Lowe?
No.
Beth Martin?
No.
Pat McKee?
Yes.
Jane Roosh?
No.
Lance Trollope?
Yes.
Lee Webster?
Yes.
Tricia Zunker?
No.
Five to three.
Oh, no, I think we're 5-4.
Or 5-4. Wait.
All right, the motion passes. 5 yes, 4 no. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to the administration for your work on this new plan. Okay, so we are moving on. Referendum planning update. Administration has a brief update on the referendum.
Yeah, very brief. We continue to present. I think I've mentioned that we've had small turnout. We had a very interesting engagement with a parent last week who kind of embarrassedly said, you know, I just don't know what this is all about. So a little frustrating when we've been putting out a lot of information, but I think that is maybe representative. I think people are distracted by the pandemic, by school, by the election. And so today we made a point of recording the referendum presentation, and we will send that out to people so it comes directly to them. Hopefully that will help inform the community. We do have a number of, we have 3 more presentations tomorrow. There's a list, I think, on the website. But really, nothing new in that case. We just continue to present and try to inform the community as best we can. I certainly welcome any questions if there are. I would note, obviously, we know there was a vote no group. There is a vote yes group. And just for staff and maybe for board members too, there is a document attached about how staff and board members can and cannot engage in referenda. And so if you have interest, a staff person or a board member can engage in either of those efforts. You do have that right. You're an elected official. You aren't paid by the district. This is not your primary career, so you are free to participate in any way you see fit. So if you want to come to some of the presentations, whatever you want to do, you're free to do that. We can't expend district resources in favor or opposed to the referendum. It's just we can only inform.
You can also put a vote yes sign in your yard if you're so inclined.
Yes, you can.
Okay, thanks for that, Keith. All right, moving on, agenda item 10.
I have a question.
Okay.
For Dr. Moore. Do you have an update on the Historical Preservation Committee? Because I know they're doing something with grants. So do you have an update with that?
I don't know much about it. I know the Preservation Committee wants to forward a recommendation. There's a meeting, frankly, after the referendum, November 19th, I believe. I'm guessing I or someone or others will be there to speak to that. We're trying to get some legal opinions, see what our potential course of action might be. We'll be more informed before the 19th.
Okay, so moving on, agenda item 10, new business, the Education Operations Committee. We discussed the substitute pay rates, and the committee approved to recommend the following motion. So I am seeking a motion to approve the temporary adjustment of substitute rates to be equivalent to the long-term substitute rates up to $250 a day at the discretion of the administration during the pandemic. All right, first from Vice President McKee.
Second.
Okay, a second from Lance Trollope. Okay, any discussion?
Yeah, I have a question for Tabitha. So how much are the subs making now?
Can you hear me from here?
Yeah.
The long-term sub rate for teachers is $218 and some change.
218?
Yes,
Right now?
correct.
Okay. And then with the increase, can you just repeat again how much they would be making then?
They would be at $218 and some change. Right now, the daily rate is $129. So they would be making the $218 instead of $129.
Oh, they were making 218 with the increase.
Right.
And how much are they getting now then?
For daily subs, $129, basically.
One what?
$129.
And the long-term subs are already making 280.
120. Yeah, after consideration of this, I probably wouldn't be agreeable to 218. I guess I would want, if it wasn't 218, if it was something lower, is there a number that you can recommend, Tabitha, something that's lower than that?
My recommendation is the long-term sub rate that I put forward initially because that will match or come close to the long-term sub rates that the other districts are paying around us. And I want us to be competitive. So I don't have another number that I would recommend short of the long-term sub rate because that's the rate we have established.
Okay. Well, we've been getting emails from teachers about this increase, and they're thinking it's really unfair. So that's one thing that I have an issue with. They've gone through professional development. Some of them have, gotten their master's degrees, and they're thinking that, this is too high for the substitutes. So, unless there's something lower than this $218, this number, I don't think I would be agreeable to this motion.
I was just going to ask Deb, could you speak to I know there's some comparable about daily rates and things. Could you speak to that a little bit?
The daily rates that we pay for both our regular daily rate as well as our long-term sub-daily rate are comparable to other school districts. I think part of what staff were concerned about, because I've addressed and had conversation with several staff members as well, they got concerned when they heard the up to $250. At this point, my intention is not to go over our regular long-term daily rate of the $218. I don't think that's necessary. I appreciate the grace that the board is offering for us to do so if we need to. That was very appreciated. At the same time, I don't know that it will be necessary. The other piece that I've used from an informational standpoint with the staff members that I've talked to is they need to remember our substitutes are not working every day. We have substitutes who haven't worked all year long. So what they're trying to do is extrapolate $250 a day times every day in the school year, and what is that person making? Are they making more than I am or about the same as I am? The reality is our substitutes are maybe only working 1 or 2 days a week, if that. So the overall annual amount that they're making is significantly less than our current staff. And I think that's a piece that not all of our staff are remembering, because they're trying to take a daily rate times all of the days that we are working. And that's part of why districts around us, and my recommendation matches, to move to that long-term subrate, because our substitutes are not making anywhere near the kind of money that they used to make in prior school years when they did work 3, 4, 5 days a week at times. It's just not happening because our staff are working from home when they're on quarantine, or they are doing their best to be in their classrooms as much as possible. And we're also not pulling people out for professional development. That was almost a guarantee of hours and days for our subs in the past, and we're not doing that this year. So our substitutes are going to be in a position where they are significantly short, even with this increase, compared to what they've made in prior years. I hope that background and information is helpful. It has been helpful to the staff members who I've explained that to that have reached out directly to me, but I don't know if any of those people match the people who have reached out to you, because I wouldn't know unless they also included me in that communication.
If I could also, just a couple other points of clarification. Substitutes receive no benefits, right? That's a significant part of the compensation package. And Tabitha, am I correct that the long-term subrate is based on the starting salary of the teacher?
It is. It's a base bachelor's degree salary on our salary schedule.
Yeah. So the most they would be making is on a daily rate. No other comparables would be the same as our lowest paid teachers with a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
Minus benefits.
Correct.
Yeah, I realized, that I thought about that too, that, our substitutes, they're not here, they're not teaching for us, as a regular teacher would, but, I think about what we did earlier this year with the pay freeze, and, I'm putting myself in those teachers' shoes, and I'm just thinking, if I was a teacher, I would have some bad feelings about this, and so, the one thing that always came up is teacher morale, and I think this wouldn't help morale, and I understand that, we need to be competitive with our neighboring districts as well, but, the one thing that I'm really concerned about is teacher morale. I mean, these feelings of, I did all of this work and now, it's a teacher pay freeze. And then we're going to be increasing substitute pay. It's really a mixed message here. So I don't even really know how I would vote now. So those are the things that I'm struggling with.
This is really about supply and demand, and the supply is very low, and the demand is high. So we have to, and we can do this here. The problem with the teachers not getting the raises that they deserve is the supply and demand issue also. But Madison, instead of recognizing that and giving us more money to properly compensate our teachers, always block. But we can address this one issue of the substitutes on our own. We don't have control over it.
Piggyback on what Jane is saying, I agree. The subs are down. We're down by about 100, if I'm not mistaken, if I heard you correctly before. We know that the best coverage for classes sometimes is to look within instead of looking outside. If we consider any possibility of increasing that hourly rate that our teachers would be getting if they were to cover for a college
Not at this time we haven't. That was built into the budget that we will be passing. We've discussed it. It's not been something that we've discussed in great detail because, of course, we were involved in creating the compensation model. And so the answer to your question is no. We aren't thinking about that right now. I just want to make one clarification too. The pay freeze is for all employees, not just for teachers.
I misspoke, yes, for all.
Okay, so...
I'd like to support Jane's statement as well. It doesn't hurt the teachers at all to have the subs paid more. It's not taking money out of their pockets to put in somebody else's. This is something good we can do to ensure that we do have subs. And so I would support it.
Yes, thank you. So we do have a motion on the floor, and we did address last meeting also just the potential message of a salary freeze, and Bob Tuss had explained they're just different monies. This is essentially a one-time money for this increase with the substitute pay, and when you consider that we do need to stay competitive, some of these districts around us are requiring basically non-compete clauses, so we're losing so many substitutes. I support the district being able to have the substitutes that we need so that we don't have to have disruptions and try to get creative because we don't have enough subs. So we do have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Okay. I think we're going to roll call vote this for clarity. Sure.
Okay, Jeff Lee.
Yes.
Todd Lowe.
No.
Beth Martin.
Yes.
Pat McKee.
Yes.
Jane Bruce.
Yes.
Lance Trollope.
Yes.
Lee Webster.
Yes.
Jim Boucher.
Yes.
Tricia Zunker.
Yes.
8-0.
Okay. All right, that motion passes. 8 yes, 1 no. Moving on, committee updates, board referrals. There are none. We're at agenda item 12, open forum. First item, legislative liaison report. Still hasn't met. Do you have an update or a report for us, Clerk Lowe?
No, I do not.
Okay. Then,
just to bring up one thing, there is a bill being proposed that would exempt school districts, you've probably seen it, from their student count from this year. Maybe but instead use prior 3 years. Is that it hasn't been passed, but it's being proposed. We're not the only district that has had lots of. Do you know more about that?
Sure, the proposed legislation is to use the greater of your actual count or what last year's was. And since we're in declining enrollment and we get protection in our revenue limit formula, for this year that wouldn't matter. But it certainly would matter for next year and the year after that because it's a 3-year rolling average. So that's being proposed right now and we'll watch it closely. But for this year's budget, that will not matter.
is that something that we would want to submit a letter in support?
There's a lot of legislation being brought up right now, and we'd be doing nothing but supporting it with letters if we wanted to, but it certainly would work in our favor.
Right, exactly.
Work in our favor.
Well, I think maybe that's something we'd want to consider, at least for our representatives here, urging this legislation, because it would, given this year, I think we definitely would want that to pass.
Definitely. I don't know how serious they're getting about it, because lawmakers aren't saying a lot these days other than their campaign, right? Because the election's coming.
Right.
So it's understood. So
Yeah. Well, let's keep an eye on that and see if we can submit something. All right, thank you. Okay, agenda item 12B, board member growth, professional growth and development report. Do any board members have any professional growth and development to report?
Would it be at this time to mention the Region 5 meeting that we had last Wednesday?
Yep, great.
For the Region 5 WAS organization. It is online. If you want to view it, it was about 55 minutes long. And I believe Lee was virtually there, and I believe also it was of the regions, 15 regions, it was the best attended one. So I bring that to you and get that information. And it was at that time, Bob, I would like to ask this question. Is it for sure that there is no repair bill because of the fact that legislature, they have not met? And where are we at with the possibility of a repair bill?
Sure. We can't say for sure it's not happening, but it sure is getting more obvious every day that it's not happening. We thought it was pretty certain to happen in April. Last time a budget repair bill happened, it was in February. But we had a brand new governor, and the next biennial budget was going to start the next year. So we're in a little bit different situation here. But we're thinking more and more every day that the budget repair bill is not going to come. The budget's going to be repaired by virtue of the next biennial budget is going to be the budget repair bill. So it's looking more and more like this current year budget will be as written. Now, I was waiting for this opportunity to come up on the agenda because of how we're agendized, right? But 2 weeks ago, I stood in front of you and we talked about the annual budget. And it was all the electorates voting, right? That budget gets established quite early because you have to vote on what the budget looks like that gets presented at the annual meeting. We publish it in the paper, we create the book, and at that point we're obligated to present that same budget. So we went for about 2 months here where we couldn't really change anything if we wanted to. That changes October 26th. October 26th, you get a chance to make the budget what you need it to be in light of the most current information. So between now and October 26th, I'm going to be building a budget that reflects a budget repair bill. Doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So you'll see something October 26th that reflects no budget repair bill, because to your comment, it looks more and more like one's not going to happen. And I'm talking to lawmakers also, and they're agreeing nothing's going to happen for this biennial budget. So I'm excited to present to you a budget on October 26th that recaptures what was in the original budget that was presented by the state. So I can't wait to share it with you.
Thank you.
I have a comment that I want to make about the Region 5 conference. I found it very interesting. It was the first conference that I've been at. Jim Boucher, who may know, was elected to represent our district. And in reality, he was a key figure in the whole presentation. It's obvious that we've got a really good relationship with the other members in the state-wide organization. And it was a Zoom meeting. It wasn't the most exciting meeting I've been to, for one of these, but I thought it was really good that we got that chance to do that. And I commend him for the role he played in that.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so the next thing is, it says that I will be assigning some representatives. These were positions that were filled by Teresa Miles, and I am going to postpone that till the next regular meeting because I'd like to take any interest. And so if you could send that interest to Cassie, if you could send out an email. And this will be for the new CISA 9 board representative. It will be the new Wausau School District School Foundation board representative. And similarly, Dr. Holtz and I had a meeting with Mayor Rosenberg to talk about some kind of liaison, essentially, with City Council. And we were trying to figure out how that would work, and Mayor Rosenberg was really on board with something too. But it wouldn't really be a liaison for a specific committee, but somebody that's just kind of pays a little bit more attention to some things, and maybe her assistant is in communication with Cassie, who could be in communication with a particular person on the board to pay attention to those things. So if we could put that also on, and that's just more informal, similar to how we've had Marathon County Board of Supervisors with Lee continuing on that, just to be good external partners. Stay informed if there is something. Maybe there's nothing, but certainly I think it's better to try to open those avenues of communication to the extent possible. So we can do that for the next regular meeting. All right, thank you. Superintendent commentary, if any. Dr. Hiltz?
I do have brief comments tonight. A little recognition and congratulations to two of our own, Mr. Boucher, WASB has recognized you for achieving level 1 in terms of the WASB member recognition program. This is given for board members who attend and engage in professional learning around their board duties. So congratulations to you, and as well to Mr. Lee Webster, who's achieved level 2 for the WASB member recognition program. I'm guessing that was announced at the Region 5 meeting. Sorry I missed it. We had a referendum presentation that night. But congratulations to you two, and thank you for engaging in learning around your board duties. Thank you very much.
All right, wonderful. So then we're at presiding officer commentary. I don't really have anything except I want to just say a huge thank you to Dr. Jeff Lee for stepping up. We had so many wonderful people that wanted to serve in this capacity, and you would have known firsthand that this certainly would have been a difficult time. And I think that it's one thing to serve in public service generally, but to recognize that this is a very difficult time, and to willingly throw your name in the hat after the many years, I just want to say thank you very much. Welcome back, even if just for the 6 months. Thank you very, very much. And with that, yes, welcome back. All right, with that, I'm seeking a motion to adjourn. First from Vice President McKee, second from Lance Trollope. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.